Hunter x Hunter is a series that is very highly regarded among the anime community. People will not shut up about how good it is, and despite all the hype, it's a series that I just never really got around to. I was too busy catching up on Naruto and Bleach, which in retrospect may have been a mistake. But anyways, I finally, after years of putting it off, watched all of Hunter x Hunter. Well, not the Hunter x Hunter, the 2011 version that everyone loves to death and cannot stop praising. I watched the other Hunter x Hunter, the 1999 version that almost no one ever talks about. So I dived into the series to see what it offered. I thought, well, at least I might get a Fullmetal Alchemist 2003 experience, something that is totally different from the manga, going in its own unique but still well-told path. But that is not the case. As far as I'm aware, it is a faithful adaptation of the manga, so either the community is really overrating the series, or the remake really is that much better. But I haven't seen the 2011 remake, so I'm just going off my feelings of this version's arcs. By the way, this won't matter to the normal people in the audience, but I have decided to upload this video in 4:3 aspect ratio, so all the folks who covet CRTs like me can watch in glorious standard def full screen. For this video, I've decided to tackle the series by each arc and give my general opinions. The Hunter exams are okay. I really enjoyed certain elements of it. The part where Gon gets messed up by Hisoka and the blower needle guy, sorry I don't remember his name, is really awesome. I love the dark cathartic episode Gon has to go through afterwards where he deals with his crushing defeat and serious wounds. I also really like the part where Gon, Killua, Kurapika, Leorio, and Tompa have to fight the prisoners. It has some good foreshadowing to the viciousness of Kurapika and the ingenuity of Gon. Just in general, as far as tournament arcs go, it is a super unique one in terms of its events. It doesn't really focus too much on fighting, but rather on thinking outside the box and not falling into the exam proctor's traps. But I have some serious issues with this arc. The first thing to say is that this arc looks atrocious in the anime. Like, it is so dark. So dark. Like 50% of the time, it is really hard to see what is going on. And in general, it looks far worse than many other animes that were from that time period as well. Obviously, it isn't as well preserved as other series, unfortunately, the last legal release being out of production for years and none of the 30 OVA episodes ever came out in North America. That being said, that isn't the only problem. Yeah, it doesn't look good because of the bad quality of the footage, but even if it had a full Blu-ray restoration, it would still look bad. The art style is very grainy and generally dated. I love the 90s aesthetic, but this show definitely takes it too far. And as I said earlier, the contrast is just abysmal. It's like they dialed up the black levels to the max and made the light sources as muddy as possible. Even Yu Yu Hakusho by the same author and a 7-year-older show looks far superior in every way. Remember the days when Studio Pierrot tried?
And you don't seem to understand.
Speaking of Yu Yu, I don't really like the way Kurapika is introduced into this series. Later on he becomes far more interesting, but in the beginning he is literally the exact same character as Kurama. Like a carbon copy, they are both the super kind straight men who keep the group in check. I found it very annoying in the beginning, like Togashi couldn't be creative enough to write a new character. Later in the series it becomes obvious that he isn't the same, but he just starts off too similar. The final issue I have with the Hunter exams is the pacing. I found this arc pretty boring, to be honest. I even fell asleep a couple of times trying to watch it. Now, as far as I'm aware, the 1999 version of this arc has a lot of filler, and I can believe it because it's just really so sluggishly paced. Overall, I would give the Hunter exams a 6 out of 10. On to the next arc. The Heaven's Arena arc is definitely a step up in most ways. I really like the focus on Killua and Gon's friendship in this arc, which is always a highlight of the show, and the introduction of Nen really does change the game for the series. On a side note, everyone loves the Nen system with a passion, and I really just don't understand why. Don't get me wrong, it is an above average power system for shonen, I just don't see what is so earth-shattering about it. To be fair, the highlights of it may hit me harder in the 2011 version, but I just don't know yet. Anyways, I also really like the training with Master Wing. It was a lot of fun to watch Gon and Killua have an explosive growth and power happening so fast. Even the art style I think is a major step up over the previous arc. Now, it is still below average in my opinion, but at least it isn't so dark, which really made the Hunter exams a lot more painful for me. And I really like the focus once again on Hisoka, who really is the best villain in the series. He's a creepy pet,
child-loving, really wonderful guy who appreciates their boundaries and feelings.
But it honestly makes him a scarier villain for Gon and Killua to face. Speaking of Hisoka, Gon's fight with him is just great. One of the best in the series. I loved watching Gon's ingenuity in play. It really reminded me a lot of Bakugo vs Uraraka, and I'm sure Horikoshi definitely took inspiration from this fight. Everything up to this point is great, but I just feel like afterwards the arc really sputters out. I found a lot of the post-Hisoka fight stuff to be really kinda boring. It kinda got its climax halfway through and the rest of the arc just feels like falling action. I just thought the pacing of it made the arc more boring. I really like when Killua forces the people to withdraw from the tournament with some serious dark killing intent. However, I think it would have been better if it happened before Gon fought Hisoka. It doesn't really make sense from a narrative perspective to do it this way, but from a build-up one, it does. Otherwise, the send-off from Wing to Killua was good stuff, and them going back home to Gon's house was great. 7 out of 10 for this arc. Now, the Orc New City Arc is where the show finally clicked for me. This was the arc that really just stepped everything up in most ways. They even changed the opening after like 45 episodes just for this arc. At first I didn't like the new opening, but I grew to love it. The opening has a dark, brooding mood. It's almost creepy or ethereal in certain ways, and I just think they did a really great job. Anyways, this is Kurapika's arc through and through. It's when his revenge against the Phantom Troop comes to a head, and it is super satisfying. This is when he really differentiates himself from Kurama. Yes, they both have a dark side, but there's a big distinction. Kurama had a dark past that he has grown from, but sometimes it comes back to him and he needs to show self-control. Kurapika rather is absolutely ruthless, a vicious and cold calculated killer. His revenge isn't fiery and hot like a lot of other characters, it is a cold and hollow revenge. The development he gets from enacting it too really changes him. He starts to realize that the spiders are just flawed people like him too, and it sends him into a turmoil. After stripping Chrollo of his nen, he ends this arc in a very dark place. The only one of the troop he manages to kill directly is Uvogin, and he feels almost broken at the end. When Greed Island starts, it's almost like he's forcing himself to act the way he used to make his friends happy, and it is a genuinely haunting conclusion to that part of his character arc. He is left empty and broken, directionless but still full of his cold rage, and Kurapika gets an amazing fight with Uvogin. It's definitely the best fight by far in the entire series. Usually shonen protagonists are screaming through the fight and being the idealist, always in the right. In this fight, Kurapika is the one who is betrayed as the villain. He just seems like he has snapped and all of his reasoning has left him. It's just really great stuff. Also, Kurapika is just so overpowered in this arc. His status as a specialist when he activates his red eyes gives him maxed out stats in like every category. This truly is a stomp fight. Uvogin thinks he has a chance, but honestly he just gets destroyed. Even when he kills Uvogin, just watching him react is such a great scene. We see the disgust with himself. It's like he is genuinely a kind and gentle person at heart, but his revenge quest made him cast away his previous self. That cold demeanor cracks though when he murders someone. A brief glimpse of his humanity shines through, and he clearly finds it hard to do the things he feels he needs to do. I also love the villains in this arc. The Phantom Troop is definitely a standout group of enemies, all of which are good characters. Their camaraderie and sense of duty in their group shows that they are just people like everyone else in this show. Now, Hisoka is definitely my favorite villain, but Chrollo is a close second. He has a very stoic and unwavering demeanor, always emotionless and thinking logically. What makes him such a great villain, though, is just how calculated he is. All of his plans are so well thought out, and he is always taking all the weaknesses of his group into consideration when he does anything. We don't really get a lot of his backstory, but what we see really makes us understand his motivations without being heavy-handed. Also, he looks like he could be in Evanescence, really early 2000s stuff. And thank God, finally they got the art style right. This arc is so stylized compared to the previous ones, and it is really appreciated. And surprisingly, even though most of this arc is at night, it isn't too dark. Now I do have a lot of praise for this arc, but there are some problems. I don't think Gon and Killua get enough screen time in this arc. They are the main characters and have the strongest written dynamic in the show, so it's just kind of disappointing to me to see that they just had a few major scenes in this arc. And Leorio is just done so dirty in the show. Yes, he has a really important part, but overall he just gets sidelined as always. That really makes me sad because Leorio is a great character, filling in the Kuwabara role from Yu Yu Hakusho. The weird part though is that instead of him learning from the final arc of Yu Yu when Kuwabara gets shafted, he hits Leorio so much harder. The guy barely gets anything at all in this show after the Hunter exams. Anyways, this is a great arc, 8.5 out of 10. And finally coming to the last arc, Greed Island. This arc is really weird to me because in some regards it is the best arc in the series, and in others it is by far the worst. I gotta start by saying that I really hate the art style again. They literally just hit the perfect balance in the last arc, and it is all by this garbage, cartoony, bright I really do not like it at all. Now in this arc, I really love the introduction of Biscuit. She's one of the best characters in the show, and her training arc with Gon and Killua is amazingly well done. Their growth feels earned and well explained, and most of all, it is super well paced. Gon gets his rock, paper, scissors technique and it's just awesome. It really fits his character perfectly. The volleyball Nen fight was also super creative and a lot of fun. In general, Greed Island feels like a mix of so many ideas that just typically don't fit into a shonen story. Instead of it feeling like a mess, it's surprisingly coherent and just a lot of fun to watch. In terms of electric energy, Greed Island is by far the strongest arc in the series. It is never dull and the pacing doesn't let up. Also, Gon's final fight with the bomber is pretty epic and surprisingly brutal. I'll tell ya, I wasn't expecting Gon's whole hand to be ripped off his body. Okay, now that I've gone through the good, here's the bad. Oh my god, the villains in this arc are just atrocious. They are fairy tale tier, just plain evil with no depth. It is really disappointing coming from the Phantom Troop's nuance. I just honestly thought that Togashi was better at writing villains than this. Every villain in the series before this arc and in Yu Yu Hakusho is better than these clowns. And this arc in general just feels strangely out of place in a lot of ways. It lacks the nuance of what the show is known for. Greed Island just ends up feeling like any generic shonen arc that could have been in any other show. It strangely feels more like something out of Naruto than Hunter x Hunter, and it's just a bizarre turn. The arc's build-up and conclusion is one of the most predictable of any arc in the series, and I'm not against a radical change in tone. I think in certain ways it worked really well, but it has an aura of childishness and a tinge of generic that just did not sit right with me. Greed Island is probably the hardest for me to rate, but I would say like a 6 out of 10. Alright, that was my opinions on Hunter x Hunter, and I'm very excited to see the remake now. I feel kinda crazy for not praising this show like a deity like everyone else. That's why I want to see what changes are made, and how the remake tackles a lot of the show's issues. That being said, I really had a fun time watching Hunter x Hunter, and you guys better bet I'll be back whenever I get around to watching the remake for an updated opinion. But that is it for me today, weebs. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.